Well, hey there, Penn State football fans. I know your weekend probably didn't go according to the way you hoped it would go. Penn State is now 7-1 after the Ohio State loss, 20-13 in front of 111,000 people. Johnny McGonigal and I were there, and we are here right now on Monday to talk to you after James Franklin's Monday presser, where he previewed the whiteout game against Washington on Saturday night, but he also had several things on his mind about Penn State's performance against Ohio State. 20-13, Johnny. James was pretty good today, I thought. He talked about a lot of different things. What stood out to you?
Yeah, Bob. I mean, look, we've seen in the past after big losses like this that sometimes James Franklin will just lean on that 1-0. We're on to the next game, focus he could have came out and been like, yeah, we're focused on Washington, nothing else matters. He wasn't like that, though. So to give him some credit there, like he did answer, every question that was thrown at him about the Ohio State game, which was pretty much every one. Like, yeah, it was a Washington preview press conference, but every question was about the Ohio State game. It was about the biggest game of the year, Penn State's first loss of the year, and rightfully so, right? Because that's what all the fans and everyone they're still talking about is the Ohio State game, and I think we'll be talking about that game for a long time to come. The biggest thing to me, and what I wrote off of it immediately, was just recapping and reviewing the goal line situation that was so crucial at the end of the game. Penn State 1st and goal from the 3, down a touchdown midway through the fourth quarter. Kaytron Allen doesn't get in. And then a pass that falls incomplete. And, there was a lot of second guessing, or really even in the moment, just guessing, like, why are they not using Tyler Warren here? It was him and the Wildcat that ran at 33 yards and got you on the doorstep of the end zone in the first place. So, James Franklin said, sure, hindsight is 2020, and but he gets the frustration, he gets the questions, he understands it. He even mentioned, Tyler Warren could have gotten the ball in that scenario, whether it was out of the Wildcat or whether he was being thrown to on the first 3 downs, really, where they just kind of went boom, boom, boom with Kaytron Allen. Didn't get through. He also mentioned that the push could have been better up front with the offensive line. He said that, look, we trust Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton, those running backs that are good players. And he closed his thoughts on the goal line situation by saying that, fundamentally, but also mentally, you got to be able to get a yard. And he referenced the Big Ten title win over Wisconsin, where Wisconsin couldn't get a yard against Penn State's defense, and that ultimately won them the game on that 4th down stop. He just said, look, we got to be able to get a yard, and it really comes down to that. And it did come down to that on Saturday against Ohio State, Bob.
Yeah, Johnny, I thought, James was rambling a little bit. He was trying to cover all the bases. He didn't want to throw the OC under the bus. He did say it's a collaborative effort. Usually that stuff that he was asked about, is there even any time to kind of have long, passionate discussions in the moment? And of course, you don't have enough time. He said that stuff has to happen before the game. But if James would have, I thought James said it best. If he could have just said this, and he did say it, but then he talked for another couple of minutes. Players, not plays. And that's really what it was, right? Tyler Warren got him in position to the 1st and goal and 3. There was a game earlier in the year, I think it was the Illinois game, where he was the Wildcat quarterback. He is a big athlete. He's not a big lumbering wide body. He took the ball and jumped over the pile. And that would have been tough to stop at 261 pounds. He said, but then he would say, Ohio State was probably expecting it. But hey, the opposite of that, Johnny, is Penn State knew exactly what was coming after they failed on offense with Ohio State took over at their 1-yard line. And Ohio State put it right down their mouth, man. It was 11 plays, 58 yards. James said, I think it was concerning, right? And he said, starting with the quarterback sneak for 4 yards, Ohio State owned the line of scrimmage. Those 2 backs just excelled at making the right cuts, at picking up yards after contact. And twice on 3rd down, the Pennsylvania prep star, Will Howard, you and I looked at each other in the press box on both of those 3rd down runs going, we know what's coming, right? And Will Howard went around the left side twice for 1st downs. It leads back to what James said. You have to, when everyone in the stadium knows what's coming, you still have to be able to execute. Penn State didn't on its drive on offense. Ohio State did on its, and that those two drives, as interesting as the first 50 minutes of the game were, those two drives really said it all, I thought, on Saturday.
It did. It's one of those things where we don't ever want to, just boil a game down to a few moments, because, there were a lot of moments in the first half. Penn State could have scored at the end of the first half, and Igmanosa makes an incredible interception, in the end zone to deny Penn State there. Like, there were moments, throughout the game, Penn State's wide receivers were completely non-existent. They were non-factors. Harrison Wallace had, I think, one catch for over 20 yards. He also had a drop. And Julian Fleming had one catch for, I think, 4 yards, the transfer in from Ohio State. The wide receiver position, which has been an issue for Penn State and something that I'm writing about for Tuesday morning. We're recording this Monday afternoon after James's press conference. So the story might be out by the time you guys listen to this. But something that I'll be writing extensively on is whether or not these wide receivers are good enough to make a college football playoff run. My initial thinking is no, especially after watching them in this Ohio State game. So there were moments throughout the game, there were issues throughout the game, facets of the game throughout the afternoon that helped decide this outcome. But it is pretty easy to also just look at those two drives. James Franklin, after the game, and then even today on Monday, mentioned and called Ohio State's final drive a championship drive. Penn State was not able to do that. They were not able to finish off their drive and have their own championship drive to tie the game and possibly send it to overtime, possibly stop Ohio State on the next possession, drive down and kick a game-winning field goal. Like, that was all within the realm of possibility for Penn State in its biggest game of the year, in a top-5 matchup, and they just weren't able to get it done. And that's why they're sitting here with one loss, and that's why they're sitting here with both the local and national narrative, and the perception of this team is that, they can get into the college football playoff, but are they really national title contenders? No. Right now, no, they're not.
Yeah, Johnny. Hey, so it's the blue-white breakdown. We're going to get to a couple of our tech subscribers. They had a lot of opinions after the game. I know the fan base obviously is pretty riled up over this one. We're going to get to a couple of our PennLive Penn State tech subscriber questions and comments in this blue-white breakdown episode. We're going to have a couple later in the week. Max, Ralph, and I will preview the Washington game. Washington had a nice win over USC. Johnny, I think you and Max are going to be doing some stuff Q&A related on a podcast later in the week. A lot to get to. One thing I just wanted to point out, because I think a lot of people, if they didn't listen to James Franklin, they're probably still curious about the taunting call on Elliott Washington. Really a big play in the game. It looked like Penn State had a promising Ohio State drive stopped. Incomplete pass. Elliott was in coverage. You could see he did get kind of like he was over the receiver for a little bit, and the official immediately, it was on the Penn State sideline, immediately threw a flag. It was unsportsmanlike conduct. I believe Ohio State eventually scored on that drive. James Franklin was asked a question about if you're a coach, how do you discuss that with your players? How do you teach that? How do you clean that up? It seems like it might not be that easy. I thought James had a very thorough answer about it. He said, you address it with the player, you address it in a team meeting as well. He also said, I thought, he didn't even submit that play to the Big Ten as far as maybe something that he was not happy with. And his reasoning was, I'm paraphrasing, if you go by the letter of the law, it's probably, you could call that taunting if you really wanted to. He said, but he also, there's 5 or 6 plays in just about every game, Johnny, that could probably qualify as a taunting call. And it really is up to the official who makes the call, whether or not he perceives it that way. But he did not even submit that, even though it did seem like, at the very least, what the kids say, Johnny, it was a tic-tac, very questionable call. Could have went either way. I thought he answered that in a very interesting way.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, admitting too that they didn't submit that play to the Big Ten for review, or that penalty for review, I thought was interesting that he even disclosed that to us. When the play happened, when the penalty happened, I tweeted saying that it was pretty weak. I think I mentioned that in our post-game video as well that we recorded after the game down at Beaver Stadium on the field. Looking back at it, it's one of those two where we don't know if Elliot Washington said anything while he's standing over the player.
Right.
So if he did, that could have played into it as well. I agree with James Franklin that, the taunting deal, like, that happens throughout a game, and a lot of times the refs will let it slide. But by the letter of the law, him standing over the player like that can draw you a 15-yard penalty. And we've talked about the penalty issues before. This season, earlier in the season, Abdul Carter also had one. 3rd and 2, he had an offsides penalty that ultimately gave them a first down. And so it's one of those where James had mentioned before that, while he was annoyed and disappointed with the penalties, back in like September, he was saying that, when you really look at it, a lot of times penalties don't decide a game. But I mean, that penalty, the taunting penalty, gave Ohio State the runway to score another touchdown. The Abdul Carter penalty helped as well. And so, it's just being undisciplined in some of those moments is pretty tough. I understand it's an emotional game. It's a big game. And the issue in the instance of Elliot Washington specifically, you're pretty hyped that you just, stop them on 3rd down. But got to keep your head. Got to keep your head in those moments.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a classic borderline call at best that just did not go Penn State's way. And Ohio State, to their credit, they made the most of that opportunity. Penn State's defense, James kind of talked about it. The numbers look great. I wrote about the drive by Ohio State at the end of the game. They're number 7 in total defense, and I think number 14 in maybe rush defense. But when push came to shove, literally, in this game, for Ohio State to kind of, I thought, take it over, I think James is going to need a little bit more, I think, from his defense down the stretch. The numbers say they are a good defense, and they are. But the defense had a chance to reverse the course and kind of bail out the offense. Could not do it. But Johnny, I want to get to two things offense related, because it's continued, right? You asked him about the wideouts. They were suffocated in this game. Ohio State's athletes in the secondary and at linebacker, there wasn't a lot of room. There were not a lot of windows for Drew Aller to fit the ball into. Those windows were there in some earlier games, right? Maybe against USC, maybe against Illinois, obviously against West Virginia. Those windows were there, even against Wisconsin, for both Drew early and Bo Prabula late. They just, when you watching that game from the press box, there was not a lot of room, and that's a credit to how good Ohio State's defense is, but it also speaks to, look, Penn State's wideouts are definitely, I think, better than last year's group, but the percent better, I'm not really sure. James talked about, like, they have a couple different guys with 100-yard games. Hey, look, a 100-yard game against Kent State doesn't mean as much as a 4-catch, 60-yard game against a good team. Omari Evans has all but disappeared from the offense. He's either not in the game or they're not looking his way. He is their fastest player, but they're not getting enough from the wideouts. And Johnny, I mentioned this in a story earlier today. Something is, I don't know what it is. Something is off with Nick Singleton. I truly believe that he's much more effective as a receiver, but trying to navigate the line of scrimmage and absorb contact and get yards after contact. The player that looks so good against Illinois and early in the season, he has not been the same version of that player the last 3 games. The yards per carry are way down on rushes. Still a weapon in the passing game, and Penn State's obviously doing that, but it's a different guy. I'm just wondering how healthy he really is. I'm not saying he has an excuse, but I just don't think he's 100%.
Yeah, it's tough to say exactly what's going on there. I can just lean back on talking to Nick after the Wisconsin game about his health. And he said that, I'm dealing with some bumps and bruises right now, but I'll be good. I'm good. We know that he missed the UCLA game, and he doesn't look as explosive right now as he did earlier in the year. Right. Now, is that a byproduct, though, of Big Ten defenses being better against Penn State's offensive line than, say, Penn State's offensive line was in the non-conference or even against Illinois. It was interesting, though, that Nick Singleton, I think, had 5 catches before a Penn State wide receiver had a catch. I think Penn State wide receivers, their first catch came with less than 2 minutes to go in the second quarter. It was like a 3 or 4 yard out to Julian Fleming. Like this group has not done enough. And James Franklin pointed to different guys contributing this year as compared to last year when it was really like Keandre Lambert-Smith or no one else. And that is true, sure. Like Liam Clifford had a 100-yard game in there. Julian Fleming had the 2 fourth down catches at USC that were so big in the comeback win there. So there are moments, there are little spots that you can point out. Amari Evans, like you mentioned, has been a ghost recently, but did take the top off the defense earlier in the year. But when push came to shove in the biggest game of the year, and quite literally when push came to shove, when they had to separate from those corners, when they had to create opportunities and lanes for Drew Aller to throw into, they were non-existent. They just were not good enough. I looked it up. I think Penn State's wide receivers as a unit in Big Ten play are averaging 110 receiving yards a game. And that's not enough. It's not enough, Bob. And that's taking into account, the UCLA game where they got a little bit more room to run. And I'm sure that there are going to be moments moving forward in Big Ten play when you're facing Purdue and Maryland. Like there are going to be games where these wide receivers will break out and have nice performances. But we're talking about a team now that is focused on winning these next 4 and getting to the college football playoff, where you, in theory, have a chance to go and win a national title. Are these wide receivers talented enough to beat corners against Tennessee or Alabama or God forbid they win that first round game, and then you might go and play Ohio State again, or you might play Oregon or Georgia. Like, are they good enough to win those games, win those matchups? Like, I don't see it right now, and they have time to prove me wrong, but I just really don't see it right now.
Out of money, I know. 20 of you, and you're rich as hell. We're going to give you tax cuts. We're going to pay you.
I am not rich as hell. I work hard. I scrape to get by. Donald Trump wants to give tax breaks to billionaires, but Kamala Harris has plans to help us. She's going to crack down on price gouging and cut taxes for working people like me. I voted for Donald Trump before, but this time I'm voting for Kamala.
Yeah, Johnny, I believe it's 300-yard games by Penn State wideouts this year. Harrison Wallace had his right out of the gate at West Virginia. I think 117 yards and 2 scores. West Virginia's defense is not Ohio State's defense. Liam Clifford, I think, had 3 catches for 107 yards against UCLA. UCLA, kudos to them for kind of riding the ship a little bit. I thought they were going to be the laughingstock of the league. They've gotten a lot better. They just won at Nebraska. They gave Penn State a hard time in that game, and I thought it was fluky, but maybe it wasn't that fluky. Maybe they do have some nice athletes. They fixed the quarterback. Liam had 3 for 107 against UCLA. UCLA's not going to be confused with the Ohio State defense either. I think I mentioned Amari Evans had his big day against Kent State. The more amazing thing that when it comes to Amari, I don't see him that much on the field. Maybe he has not mastered the route tree, and he's really only good for he can really only do a couple things really well. But I just remember last year he made some plays down the stretch that were deep balls. They're not even trying to get him in the game to throw him a deep ball. So yeah, the wideouts, against Purdue, maybe they're gonna be able to stat pad a little bit. But against Maryland, they're probably gonna look pretty good. But the Ohio State tape does not lie. It was really hard for them to get open. Johnny, we're about 18 to 20 minutes into this. Thanks everyone for watching us on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts or listening to us. Johnny, I was looking through the comments from for our PennLive Penn State Tech subscribers. There's a few of them already. 3 of them are really about the same thing. I'm going to pick one question, but say a couple of them were short and sweet, and they're like, are we really sure Andy Kotelnicki called the plays on that drive when it was first and goal of the 3? 2 of them, 2 completely different people, said the same thing. And then another tech subscriber had actually a better thought out question. And his name's Mike Reach. He's been with us for a while. He said, Just a dude born in Central PA living in Denver, Colorado. I'm very worried about red zone offensive play calling. It's been a pattern all year, but really awful against Ohio State. I wonder if Franklin is taking over play calling then. What gives? So that's more of maybe a big picture look at it, not just the one drive against Ohio State where they went Katron Allen up the middle, and they had Venga in motion on all three plays when maybe he could have been better served to try to get push inside. And then the throw to Khalil Dinkins. I thought there was contact there, but if you're going to throw the ball to a tight end, man, I don't think Khalil Dinkins has some ability. He doesn't have Tyler Warren's ability, but those were the calls. But Mike is asking about the red zone play calling all season. I don't know what you've seen. I don't know if you think it's a problem. They've generated more explosive plays, I think, that they have at this time last year. But I think when you look at what happened with Singleton it must have happened in the Illinois game. He just doesn't look the same. Omari Evans has disappeared. If it's not Tyler Warren going for 30 or more yards as a runner or a receiver, I just wonder who's going to do it.
Yeah. No, I mean, the explosiveness hasn't been there like it was in the non-conference. Coming out of the non-conference, going into Big Ten play, that's all anyone was talking about was how explosive this offense was under Andy Kotelnicki and about those strides that were made. And since they got into Big Ten play, those plays have not really been there so far. It's been Tyler Warren or bust. And we talk about the wide receivers and we talk about Tyler Warren. His involvement on Saturday was not only curious and, in his absence at first and goal at the 3 and those 4 plays that followed, but I think he had 3 catches for 16 yards before the 31-yarder on that same drive that he then had the 33-yard run on the Wildcat. And that 31-yard catch, Drew just threw it up for him. Anyone else on Penn State's roster is not coming down with that catch. That was just giving your best player an opportunity to go make a play, and he did. And I think they should probably do that a little bit more often, is just giving Tyler Warren a chance, one-on-one, to go do something, because he can. He can more than anyone else in that locker room. With the red zone specifically, I don't know about the play calling with Franklin.
Sure.
I know that there were some questions there, from fans and even us in the press box. We're like, is James tapping into this a little bit? He is a former offensive coordinator. Yeah. Down the stretch, is he getting too micromanagey? Because it wouldn't surprise me if he was at all, but we just won't know. We don't know that, and we probably will never know that. But the red zone issues for me is an issue. You look at them overall nationally, they rank 41st in the FBS in touchdown conversion rate in the red zone, which is not bad. But if you look at Big Ten plays specifically, they've scored 10 touchdowns on 19 red zone trips. Yeah. So that's pretty much 50-50. 50-50, you're either scoring a touchdown or trying a field goal. And that, when you look at conference play for all the teams in the FBS, that percentage is, I believe, 95th. Yeah, 95th in the FBS. So it has been an issue. It was an issue on Saturday. The ticky-tack offensive PI, whatever, at USC, but still they had to settle for a field goal in that situation. They had to settle for a field goal, to open, even open the game against Ohio State. And so, there have been issues there. And I don't know if there's an easy answer other than just throw it to Tyler Warren 3 times in a row. Because right now the guys up front are not getting enough push. I thought Katron could have scored, just looking back at those plays at the end of the game. I thought Katron had an opportunity to score on 2 of those 3 runs. I thought he had enough wiggle room to try to get in there, whether he missed the seam or whatever. But I think on the 3rd one, I thought that was firmly on the offensive line, not just simply not getting the job done. And so, it's an issue right now, Bob. And again, it's going to look better when they go up against Maryland and Purdue. It's going to look better in those games, and those numbers are going to get boosted up and padded up as well. But when it matters most, it's an issue.
Yeah, and even going back to last year, Johnny, not to pile on, but there were issues pretty evident. Or after that first game at home against West Virginia, when Drew threw for 325 yards, Keandre Lambert-Smith looked like an NFL receiver, had a big catch and run. He looked like he was going to be the next in line after Jahan Dotson to emerge as a guy that, hey, they finally got a field stretcher they can depend on. It wasn't the case. And you look at their numbers at last year, when they played Michigan, when they played Ohio State, even when they played Ole Miss, it was a struggle for them to generate plays when it really mattered. They had 2 games against Delaware and UMass where they scored 63 points in each. And that's when you talk about stat padding and making guys look good. And they had a 51-point game against at Maryland, which for whatever reason, they always show out at Maryland. A lot of those stats came in games like that. So I think what you said is absolutely accurate. You go into Big Ten play, you expect it to be harder to do. I also just wonder, and I as this season unfolds, and if it's more of the same, we're going to look back and say, like, whatever happened to Nick Singleton in that Illinois game, ever since then, he was such an explosive player through the first few games of the season. You look at the big plays he created, and it just hasn't been that way. He's still a weapon in the passing game, but that's different. In the Big Ten, eventually you got to be able to run the ball. You got to be able to sustain drives. You got to be able to tire out defenses and set them up for some big runs late in the game. And that's not been the case. I just wonder if what's going on with Penn State's run game is connected to everything with this offense, whether it's in the red zone, whether it's first and goal from the 3, or whether it's defense is fearing it enough to set up some easier plays in the passing game. I wonder if it's all connected. Maybe we'll never know, but I just think that there are some common denominators there. And Penn State, I think this Washington game, we really haven't talked about it, Johnny, and James didn't really say a lot about it. This Washington team is pretty interesting. They've had some no-shows in some games that were surprising to me, but they've also, to beat USC, man, in close games, Johnny, geez, that's a soap opera. But they did win. They did beat Michigan at Washington. I don't know about a cross-country trip. At least they're not making them play at noon. That's in their favor. But I just wonder, there might be a little bit of a hangover, I think, on Saturday. And I kind of expect to see one because they put everything into that Ohio State game. And to see it play out the way it did, it has to be awfully frustrating. But at least they have the carrot of the National College Playoff that is coming. And I do believe Penn State has the talent to win out and be an 11-1 team and have a nice spot in that playoff.
Yeah, I would firmly expect, given the rest of the slate, given what they have ahead of them, that this Penn State team should be 11-1. And at that point, you probably miss out on the Big Ten title. You probably miss out on the Big Ten title game because you just gave up the head-to-head tiebreaker over Ohio State. Indiana is undefeated still, along with Oregon. So Penn State's, I think I looked at their ESPN's projections. Penn State's percentage chance to win the Big Ten right now after that Ohio State loss is right around 5%. So they're not going to be going to Indianapolis unless something really crazy happens. But to still finish 11-1 and make the college football playoff, is that a success or not? I think is open to interpretation and, kind of within the eye of the beholder, whether or not, you're okay with that as a fan or, us media covering them, whether we determine or whether we think that's good enough, given what they have on this roster and what they faced with their schedule. They got to go out and meet Washington, though. They got to go out and beat Washington and take care of business. And we've seen hangovers happen with this program before after losing to Ohio State or losing a big game. Michigan State caught them. Minnesota caught them a handful of years back. And they can't allow that to happen. And I think with it being the White Out, with it being a night game, I think that will help. I also think, like you mentioned, Bob, the prospect of making that 12-team playoff, I think will refocus these guys' attention quicker than it would otherwise in the past when it was just a 4-team playoff and you lose to Ohio State and your odds of getting in are very slim.
Yeah. Johnny, I think we're about to wrap this baby up. It's a Monday. We talked about James Franklin's. It was a Washington preview, but it really wasn't. It was much more about Ohio State, the state of his players, kind of where their heads are at. He did. I gave him credit. He was very informative, whether he was talking about what disappointed him or what they need to work on, or what the taunting call, all that stuff. There's been times where James has kind of just been, hey, we're going to talk about Washington. We're going to focus. We have a lot to play for. We could have an 11-win regular season, get to the playoff, and then have a little time off if we're not in the Big Ten championship game, and we could refocus. He could have said all that. He didn't. I think it bothered him I know it bothered his staff and his players, and I was glad that he opened up a little, because I think the fans and the media needed to hear from him, because typically after games, those press conferences aren't very long. I think he was a little agitated. So to hear him kind of express himself, go into detail, I think he put his best foot forward, Johnny.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, like I said at the top, credit to him for answering all the questions and not going full 1-0 mentality mode on us, because he could have, and he's done it in the past. So yeah, credit to him for answering that, and he addressed the fan frustrations again. He addressed the, I guess, exchange he had with a member of the student section at the end of the game. Just saying, hey, look, I just asked him what his name was because he was yelling at me when I was there with my daughter or whatever.
Yeah.
So he didn't shy away really from anything. So yeah, credit to him. But yeah, also it's a deserving number of questions about this game when what happened.
Yep. Johnny, good chatting with you. Kudos to your Birds for it wasn't a pretty win, but they won. I'm sure there's some Penn State fans that are at least happy about that. We're going to have some more podcasts later in the week, more covers as Penn State gets ready for its actual whiteout game as they try and right the ship. They're 7-1. They're going to try and win out, go 4-0, get to 11-1, hopefully get a home playoff game. Who knows what's going to happen with Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, all the teams they're kind of chasing probably right now in the race. It doesn't look good, but stranger things have happened, friends.